Hello and welcome. This is Maddie. Thank you so much for buying these brushes. I hope you're really going to enjoy this set. I'm super excited about this one because I've been working on it for a few months now, and it is my biggest and favorite brush set that I've ever put together. I am a gouache painter as well as a digital painter, and I have been a little bit frustrated, I guess, over the past years. I've been trying to find a way to get closer to my preferred traditional painting style in digital, and I've just not been able to find the right textures, the right feel with brushes, other brushes that I've tried, and it's a personal thing. There's a lot of different ways you can paint with gouache, but just for the way I personally like to paint, I wasn't able to find something that I felt like I could express myself the same way as I could in traditional mediums. So I'm just showing here some of my gouache paintings so you can kind of see a little bit of what my style looks like in traditional and what inspired this set, and a lot of the textures that I was going for when I was creating these brushes, and scanning textures and brush tip shapes and things like that to put this together. So we're going to do a demo today. I'm going to do a demo of painting based on one of my traditional gouache paintings that I've scanned. So let me pull that onto the screen for you to see. I have a little thumbnail version up right now, but here's the full view. So this is actually a pretty small little sketchbook painting, but I scanned it at a high resolution so we can zoom in and see the textures. So I want to recreate this with you in digital using the brushes, and maybe I can give some tips and tricks and just show like how I would build up to this look using the brushes in this set. So that's the plan. I've included a download of my sketch. So I created a sketch here that I'm going to use in our digital painting, and you're welcome to download this if you want to like paint along in this demo, and this makes it faster and easier for you to just jump in and paint along with me. Go ahead and use this sketch. Alright, so the very first thing I want to do is just quickly familiarize with the brush set and where we can find the brushes that we're going to need throughout this painting. There's a lot of brushes in this set, so I really tried to organize them in folders and with names that helped to be able to tell what each brush was. So the first folder is basic painting brushes, so that's what it sounds like. There's a big wet paint brushes. This kind of thing would be for a nice like sky or background or a little bit more of a watery gouache texture. And then as we go down through these round brushes, we get into more dry painting textures. So you can of course try them out for yourself. I won't go through all of them, but there's flat brushes, filbert brushes. Down at the bottom they start getting a little bit more unique with some different textures and splits, and then dry brushes at the bottom there. But these are all just basic painting brushes in the first folder. The second folder has more wet effects brushes, cloud brushes, splatter brushes, things like that, things that have a wet look to them. Below that is the organic brush strokes folder. So that's basically just a way to paint more quickly. There's a lot of, in the case where you might have come up here to the basic painting brushes and taken one of these flat brushes and made all these little marks, you could alternatively go to the organic brush strokes category here and find brushes that will sort of more quickly make groups of marks together. And these are all scanned from real gouache brush strokes, so they have that look to them and nice little dry edges here and there, so they have a bit more of a real gouache look. Underneath that is large texture painters, so these are great for backgrounds and just painting in like large, big, chunky areas. Underneath that, leaves and plants. So this is just what it sounds like. We're going to go through using these later, but little trails of leaves, individual leaves, groups of leaves, things like that. And below that, grass brushes. There's lots of different grass and little tufts and weeds and things like that. Under that, flower brushes. This is for like scattering wildflowers, that kind of stuff. There's a lot of variations of some similar brushes. And this is just, the main reason for this is because I noticed when I was first making this set and I only had 1 or 2 of each kind of brush, I noticed that it was more likely that you could look at the painting and realize that it was a stamp brush, whereas if you have a lot of alternate versions that are similar but different, you can kind of mix those together and make something that looks a lot more convincing that it was hand painted, or you just don't notice the stamping pattern as much. So with the organic brush strokes, there's a lot of quite similar brushes, but the idea is you can layer and group them in ways that makes it look a little bit more, whoops, paint right on the sketch, but it makes it look a little bit more organic and traditional. So the last section is plants and flower stamps. So these are just stamp brushes. So you tap them down once and you get your plant and you're done. I mean, you can't really paint with these, you see what it looks like. They're not designed for that. If you want those types of brushes, you can go to the leaves and plants section, and there are brushes that are designed to paint groups of plants and things. But these ones at the bottom, under the plants and flower stamps, they're just stamp it once wherever you want the plant, and there you have it. So the final one, the plants and flower stamps also has a bunch of wildflowers at the bottom. Again, this brush set was inspired a lot to do with my personal preference in painting, and if you are familiar with my work, you know that I will use a lot of these Queen Anne's lace type of flowers in my work, so I have a bunch of stamps of them, maybe more than you need, but depending on if you're doing a field of flowers and summery kind of vibes, you can really build up a lot of these quickly, and it looks natural because there are a bunch of different variations of them. So that was the idea behind that. And if you find that there's too many variations, you can just keep your favorites in there, remove the ones you don't want if that makes it easier for you to navigate through the brush set. I totally understand. So, all right, so there's the little intro of where you can find the brushes, and let's get into the painting. The first thing I want to do is lock the sketch layer so I don't accidentally paint on it, so I'm just going to do that. And for the background, I think I'm going to start with just dropping in a color based on that background paper color from the original, maybe go a little bit darker. I usually like to choose a background or an underpainting color that is a little bit closer to like a mid-tone, because I find it easier to paint from there on, to paint highlights and shadows that are lighter and darker than that color. It just helps me visualize the values a little bit more easily. It kind of gets rid of that anxiety of having the blank canvas. And it's also nice when you start painting, if you have little bits, little areas where you might be painting and it kind of shows through to that background color. I think that can be a nice look rather than the white. So we'll start with that paper color back there for now, and let's get into the painting. So when I paint in traditional, I generally, I try to paint back to front when I'm doing landscapes and big to small with shapes. So I try to get like the composition blocked in the most simple way possible, as fast as possible, and then start getting more specific with my details. So blocking in big shapes first, trying to get the values working early-ish on. And I usually start with mid-tones and then shadows and then highlights, but that can sort of change based on the lighting situation and the individual scene. Generally, mid-tones, then shadows, then highlights is a good pattern for me. So I'm going to color pick just for speed. Whoops. I'm using Pure Ref to hold my little reference image up here if you're curious about that. I thought I could color pick. There we go. All right, so there's a blue from the painting. So if I was painting traditionally, I'd probably take a brush like this and come in and start, painting the background in like this. But I think we have some brushes to make that more easy for us. So under the large texture painters section, some of these background texture painters will help this go a lot more quickly. So you can basically just choose whatever one of these you like. These are a couple of my favorites. The 7, 4, 5, and 7 have a really nice texture for just a big area of the background, getting that done. So the brushes have a light color dynamics effect to them. But if you don't like that, you see how it's slightly changing the brightness and hue and saturation of the brush, just very, very slightly, but it's there. If you want to turn that off, just, you can have your brushes palette open, click this button up here under image, and yeah, you'll see the color dynamics. You can just uncheck that, and then that will turn off, and then you'll have your brush just with the solid color and no variations. But yeah, I personally like it, but it might depend on the situation. You might want to turn that off. So just want to let you know that that's an option. For any of the brushes, you can turn that on or off. And you can also make it more dramatic if you want. You can make the hue, saturation, and brightness jitter effect, like the alternating effect, much higher. It's a bit hard to control and know what to expect when it gets really high up, but it's a cool effect, and sometimes it can save a lot of time. So yeah, I usually keep it on a very low setting. So there we have our mid-tone background. I kind of like these little areas where the background paper is showing through. By the end of the painting, a lot of those might be completely gone, but I'll leave a little bit of it for now because I think it's a nice traditional kind of look anyway. Next thing I want to do is bring in a little bit of the darker color. So we have mid-tones, so we're going to go shadows now, and then we'll go lighter. So let me grab a darker color from the painting. If you aren't color picking right from the painting, how I would maybe try to come up with this color is just color pick from your current color and then go like a little bit darker, maybe a little bit more saturated, and something like that, maybe a little bit more towards purple, and you'll get something close. That's usually how I, when I'm painting it digitally, a lot of times I'll color pick from my painting to get a starting point and then like alternate it, or just change it a little bit to get closer to where I want based on, do I want it to be darker, lighter, do I want it to be cooler, warmer, and I kind of do it that way. So right now I'm just looking at the painting, the reference to kind of show me where my darker values and shadows are going to be, and just using the brush BG Texture Painter 7 to paint this in with a very, very dry textures. But I personally love this. This is my way that I usually paint in gouache, is relatively dry textures. Usually, if anything, I might start the painting with a little bit of more wet textures. It depends on the scene. Certain things for me, I find it easier to paint more wet, and certain things more dry. So for example, skies, I'll definitely paint with a little bit more watered down look, but foliage and things I like to be pretty dry, because I feel like you can use these dry textures to kind of give the impression that there's more detail there. That noisiness kind of just makes things feel busy and alive, and yeah, it's pretty. So just blocking this stuff in here. And I have it on actually I didn't do it on another layer, did it right on that layer. You could have done this on a separate layer if you were like, just wanted to be a little extra careful. I was gonna merge it down anyway, now that I'm happy with it, but it was already there, so no worries. Bring some of that darker color around the edges too. And let's make a new layer. So now I want to start with some of the lighter colors. Maybe a little bit still in the mid-tone range, but let's start with some of the groups of bushes and things. So I really want to focus on getting the big shapes reading well. So we can go up to the basic painting brushes, and I'll probably choose a flat brush. It depends on what I'm painting. When I'm in the early stages of a painting and I kind of want things to be blocky and bold and just get the composition right, I generally reach for flat brushes. So I'm going to choose the flat 1 texture, and let's try to find the right color. So color pick from what I currently have for the background here. And let's go a little bit more towards like a cyan color and a little bit brighter. See how that does. I think this might be, not bad. So this brush I really like. It's one of my favorite brushes. If you press down all the way, it goes completely solid. But if you don't press down all the way, it'll give you any number of different textured looks. So you can go real light for very light dry brushing, or, press down just a small amount. So we can kind of start painting that in. I might erase out. So another thing is I usually will use a textured brush for my eraser. So right now my eraser is the same brush, so I can kind of erase back in, drag that up into the shape that I created, and remove some of it if I feel like it was too much, if I did a little too much there. So this brush doesn't have color dynamics on right now, so until we layer up more painting here, this area does look like a little bit flat compared to the background we painted in. If you like playing with color dynamics, you can go here, you can turn it on for this brush. If you have it on apply per tip on a brush like this, where the brush tip shapes are really close together, unlike the background brushes, you'll get this kind of striping effect, which I actually think is really cool when I'm painting in a more digital style, but I don't think I will like it for this. But what you can do is uncheck apply per tip, and then what it does instead is every single brush stroke, it alternates on every single brush stroke slightly, instead of alternating on every single tip. So you can paint like this, and I'm not picking any different colors with each brush stroke. I'm just painting, and it's slightly altering it, so I think that gives a natural look too and saves some time of going over here every time. But it's okay if it looks a little bit flat right now, because we still have a lot of layering to do, and it's gonna be looking good by the end. So the next thing I want to do is I want to look for some of the dry brushing brushes. I'm going to be working on the foliage up here, getting some of these big fluffy shapes blocked in, and I have a couple brushes that help with that kind of look because I paint this type of foliage a lot. So under the organic brush strokes, there's a dry brush and dry brush curved strokes. So the curved strokes one is the one we're going to be looking for here. And I think I'm going to color pick from the reference, see what kind of green we have up here. It's a little brighter than I was. Look how bright that is. I just color picked from the painting, and that looks crazy. I'm going to go a little darker because I don't understand. It's too much. A little darker and less saturated, but we'll build up to that. But this brush is supposed to imitate like multiple curved dry brush strokes. So we can just kind of paint that down. It does have a little color dynamics to it, and I'm just trying to follow my little sketch and paint within that. So the sketch is really a guide. It's not like you have to be so strict with it. You can see I'm like all kinds of outside the sketch, but just trying to find roughly where to put these brush strokes. And we can also use the eraser to cut back into these shapes. I think that gives a really nice organic look. I feel like sometimes I get better shapes when I cut back into what I've painted with the eraser. I get like a cooler looking shape than what I originally painted. So I do it pretty often. All right, so we have this kind of thing going on right now. I still think it's like too bright, or we need to fade it in a little bit more. So let's go a little bit more blue and a little bit darker and get another green color and like introduce that around the edges of some of these. So I'm just going smaller with this brush and trying to give a little bit of shading. So we're thinking, where is the light coming from? It's coming from, if you look at the urn, it's coming from the top left, and so the left side of the planter is illuminated, and the same thing with these groups. If you imagine these as like three-dimensional like branches, the right side is really where you're going to get more shadow, and then the left side is where the sunlight's going to be hitting. So something like this. Okay. So one thing that I like to do is really move around the scene. I know that up here, this is not looking perfect yet. There's a lot more that needs to be done, but I don't want to get moving in any more detail up there until the other areas of my painting are at least blocked in. You know, we want to get everything at least there, and then we can start working on making things look nicer. So let's see what kind of other brushes we can try. In the flat brushes section, under the basic painting brushes, flat dry ends and flat dry ends smaller. This is flat 5 and 6. I really like these brushes, and let's try some of those out. So let's just choose the green from up here, and I'm also going to use that for the edge here, so we could get a little bit more of a light green color. So this brush might be too bulky to use in this spot, actually, now that I'm trying it out. We could use a thinner flat brush, like a flat split, something like that here. That might be easier to use in this small space like that. So flat split, just kind of start giving a more three-dimensional look to this hedge or whatever, this bush. So just highlight on the top. So we've got top and left, so that's where the light's coming from. So it's gonna start to look a little bit more three-dimensional. And then over here, there's like a little bush here too. Trying to get the right color. And we'll just give it a couple brush strokes. So I like to move around the painting. This is the same thing I do in traditional. I like to move around the painting when I'll have one brush and I'll have it loaded up with a certain color, and then I'll go around and just see any opportunity to use it and kind of, you know, add that texture here and there, and then move on to something else. So while I have this brush and while I have these, you know, I'm working on this medium green color, brightish green, I'm going to come up here and just add a couple more curved brush strokes. So looking at the bottom part of the image, I'm going to color pick from one of these darker greens at the top and bring that down there, maybe a little darker, we'll see. This is just a very, very base, looking at the shapes that I see in the original. This is sort of one big mass down here, but you do see like that the grass is sort of clumped up in waves. So I'm just gonna start getting some of that. It looks like also it gets pretty like teal-ish near the edges. Like I'm trying to get a pretty saturated teal color down there near the edges, and let's color pick a little bit from the background color too and kind of bring that back in. So I'm just using the flat split brush and color picking, so I'm holding Alt to bring up the color picker and dragging it down, and vice versa to kind of get a smoother overlap between the darker green and the blue background. Depending on the style, like how you workflow you like to paint in, you may want to keep the greens separated from the blues if you want to keep that background really on a separate layer from what you're painting on. But me personally, like especially when I'm going for more of a traditional look, I kind of try to paint in a little bit more of a traditional workflow, and just I use layers, but sometimes I ignore them and just paint where I want and I find it more natural. So let's bring in a little bit of a brighter color down here too. I also have some grassy brushes, so if we go to there's a few different options for grassy brushes. So other than just painting it like how I was just doing, which I kind of like to do for the very, very basis of it when I'm doing like the biggest brush strokes. Beyond that, let's make a new layer. I have, under the organic brush strokes, we have things like the one edge dry brush, which can kind of be good for if you want a harsh bottom edge to your grasses and a light top edge. We have paint strokes 1, which could work for certain types of grasses. In this case, I think the curved paint strokes, like paint strokes 4 and 5, might be good for building this up. So let's get a little bit of just a subtle difference between each layer. So a lot of this, let me actually color pick from the reference. I'm having trouble finding the right color. It's a lot brighter than I thought. Kind of building these up slowly. So starting with a pretty larger size for these kind of wavy, grassy looking textures. And then as we go lighter and more yellow, kind of layering it up and up like that. So I feel like I'm making my painting a little bit darker than the reference, but it's just, I'm just going with what feels right. So we have these curved brush strokes like that. We also have paint stroke 6, which curves in the other direction. But you don't need to worry about that. If you want to have the brush curve in the other direction, one thing that you can do is flip your entire canvas. So then now I have this brush and I can use it on this side. I can flip it and use it on this side. So that's a keyboard shortcut that you can set up for yourself to have the canvas flipping be very easy. So you can go to Edit, Keyboard Shortcuts, and under Image, so under Application Menus up here, then you go to Image and scroll down to Image Rotation and flip canvas horizontal. You want that to be whatever you can set that to whatever shortcut you like. I use Control F because I don't remember what that shortcut was before, if there was one, but I was never using it. So Control F for flip is just easy to remember. So I chose that, and it's not the mirrored view, it's actually really flipping your canvas. So that can be hard on your computer a little bit, processing power, if you have like a huge file with a lot of layers. But for most of the time for me, what I'm doing, it's fine, and it can just flip. And that way your brush, your brush will remain the same, but your canvas is flipped. So you can use different curved brushes and the other direction. Also, I like to flip the canvas just to get a fresh look at what I'm doing, and I often do that while I'm painting just for that fresh look and a new eye on the painting. So we have these other, under organic brush strokes, we have these little marks. So I'm going to turn off that layer. That was like one way we could go about it. There's so many textures. I don't think that you can like use all of these in one painting. I think that would be, probably look a little crazy. But hopefully you can find like the perfect brush for what you want. These little brush strokes really resemble the type of marks that I actually made in that painting. So I'll bring some of those in, and we can also flip, and that way I can do those little marks on the other side like this. If you find that you don't like the way that my brushes are curved, I am right-handed, and I think it's possible that maybe for some people you would prefer that they curve like the opposite way. If you go to the brush tip shape, you should be able to flip the X here, just click that, and then it'll be curved the other way. So maybe you like it curved the other way. All you need to do then is go up here, click this drop down, and click New Brush Preset, and then save it as something that you'll remember, or just replace the other brush name and get rid of the other one if you like. I'm just going to cancel this. But that way you can have the brush curved the other way if that's what you prefer. So we have these little marks here. I'm just going to add some of these for like a nice natural look of all these different types of marks. I do think we can start getting a little bit brighter with our colors here, but I just like to build up gradually to it. So, oh, here's some brushes I really like. I haven't gotten to use yet in this painting, and I don't know if I'll get to use them a lot because I like to use these for like willow trees and things like that. I think I could probably sneak a little bit in right here. So let's grab that bright green and just put like a couple little brush strokes here. It's just a nice dry brush stroke with an organic texture. There's two versions of it, and also dry, flat, plain, directional. This is nice for doing ground textures or just anything where you have a flat plane that you want a little bit of a dry texture on. So up here, for example, we can start getting some of those highlights up here. Something like that, or going down the side. But it takes layering. It takes some layering and time to get things the way you want them. Maybe here, for example, we might want to use that brush and just kind of drag things down a little bit. Let's see. I'm trying to show you a lot of the different brushes. You don't have to, of course, use all these different brushes in every painting. Let's see, for the grasses below, oh yeah, let's go to the grassy section. Grassy painters. So a lot of these are a little bit more, let me get a brighter color so you can see, a little bit more specific, like you can see the individual blades of grass, and that isn't so much what I did in this original painting. We do have some of these like fluffy grass painters. These maybe could be good for this, so let's try that out. A little bit larger, just get some of these in here. So I think that's maybe a good start. And then I'll go back to some of just the basic painters, and let's paint over it a little bit. So I don't want to worry about like messing things up. The original has a lot of rough, fluffy textures down here. And we are going to very, very soon get into actually painting the urn in this scene, because I think that's going to make a big difference. Like I was saying earlier, I don't want to get like too detailed with anything else, with anything when one area of the painting is falling behind. Like I want to keep moving everything towards being finished more gradually. So I'm just going around real quick and trying to get the background like a little bit cleaned up, and then we're going to go to the next section. So yeah, I forgot I had this earlier layer with those curved brush strokes that I saved, and I think I like it. I think I'm going to merge it with the other brush strokes that we just did. So I think I'll actually just merge all the foliage things. So if I turn this layer on and off, I just kind of have the background, and then I have all this. So I'm going to make a new layer, and let's start with blocking in the planter in the middle. So I'm going to choose the round 3 opaque brush. So I want a nice solid brush, and we want like a nice tan peachy color. Let's choose something like this and just start filling that in. And so I like the fact that the edges are a little bit messy. To me, the texture in this brush worked out pretty well. It's an opaque, it's supposed to imitate an opaque paint stroke, so one where you can basically get a solid color, but it still has a little bit of a natural look. It's not like completely solid in the way that you can get with a digital brush. It's still got a little bit of textures, a little bit of something to it that hopefully looks like a real brush stroke. So just filling this in. This would be something that I would have done with a round brush. We're gonna paint over the bottom of this, so I'm just gonna like let the bottom kind of trail down here for now, and then that'll get covered up. You could use the eraser to like rough up the bottom edge of it if you want it to be a little bit more natural looking. All right, so I think that's it, and looks a little wonky when I flip it, but I think you probably did in my original painting too. All right, so just erasing out a little bit to get some sharper edges here and there. All right, so now that we have the main structure blocked in, I want to start making it a little bit more interesting. I'm gonna zoom in on the texture on my original painting, and let's zoom in over here too, so you can see some of these textures. So you can see we have some interesting textures going on. It's not just like completely solid brush strokes there. So what I want to do is I'm going to go to the sketch layer. I'm going to unlock it. I'm going to put it on multiply mode and lower the opacity. So this will make it a little easier to see through the sketch layer, but it'll still be there to help guide a little bit. And then I'll go ahead and lock that again. And so the sketch layer is a little bit more subtle, and now I'm going to go to this layer, which we have blocked in the shape, and we can go about this a couple ways when adding detail to this. We could either just paint right on the layer here, or if you want a little bit of extra security of painting in the lines, you can lock the layer transparency up here. So when you have this layer selected, just press the little checkerboard icon up there on the top left of the layers palette, and then anything that you do, it'll only let you paint within that shape that you've already created. So I think that's really handy if you want to, just start blocking things in. So I'm going to grab this color. Actually, hold on, let me. All right, so we have this color here. I just color picked from the painting. So on the right side of the planter, it's again in shadow a little bit more. So we have some of these colors. There's a lot of different hues, so that I can make my brush really large and kind of like lightly paint down to get some interesting textures. This is something that I like to do throughout the painting process, and you may have noticed it already, but just in case, a lot of the brushes You can use in multiple different ways. So for example, like this brush, you can paint solid, hard line, smaller size or whatever size you want. But you can also make the brush pretty big and then tap down really lightly. And when you do that, you'll get a different kind of texture. Now this brush isn't necessarily made for doing that, but you can still make it work. But there's a lot of brushes that I use this way in this set. A lot of the very textured ones work well like this. So just, you can paint with it like this, with more traditional kind of paint strokes, or you can make it really light and kind of tap it down and do these kind of textures. So yeah, we can also create a clipping mask. So we can paint right on this layer with the lock transparency, but if you want to have what you're painting on a separate layer for that extra security or flexibility of changing things with it, just make a new layer right above the layer. You can right click and go to create clipping mask. Or you can use the shortcut, which is basically just hold Alt and hover your stylus in between the two layers and just click down when you see that arrow with the box next to it, and then your layer will be clipped onto the layer below. So then it's the same thing basically. Yeah, anything you do will be clipped onto the layer below. Only in this case, you can still modify this layer, move it around, do different things with it because it's not actually painted right onto the layer you're working with. So that can be nice if you aren't sure if you're gonna like what you're about to do. So for example, let's make this brush a little bit bigger. This is the flat 1 texture brush. And so we can give a little bit more of an interesting texture. Like this planter, this garden urn is made out of some type of concrete, I'm guessing. I'm not really sure the details of what it's made out of, but it has an interesting texture to it, and it's not like perfectly smooth, and it has some aging and deterioration to it. And this is one of the reasons that I really like painting these types of structures, and that goes for statues or like benches or anything that's made out of this type of material. I think it's really pretty, especially when the sunlight's hitting it like this and you got all these little grooves and crevices and things. So right now I'm just kind of adding some textures here and there. We're going to be building up to what we see in the reference. So just like a little bit darker color of this creamy color first, and then we'll worry about adding like the blue shadows and getting a little bit more complicated. Even within on the left side, with the sunny side, we get like a yellow, like an area that's slightly more in shadow, and it's just like bright yellows and pinks. And so don't be afraid to just throw some interesting colors in there that you think would look nice. On the right, there's a little bit of like, we can get a little bit of green kind of bounce light. There's a lot of bright green in this scene bouncing around. But the blue comes from mainly, the reason I chose that color is in a lot of times, and you may already have be aware of this, but in case it helps anyone, when you're outside on a nice sunny day especially, you'll notice that a lot of objects that are light colored, especially like close to white, they are really affected by the bounce light. So that's like blue light bouncing around in the atmosphere from the sky. So the white or almost white planter here will have nice warm highlights on the left side, and then the right side in shadow will have a lot of blue bounce light. So it looks really pretty when you're outside and you can notice these little things. It's just, it's something that I kind of miss in photographs sometimes, because sometimes photographs don't pick it up as strong as it looks in person. So that's a reason that I really enjoy doing plein air painting and stuff like that. But I also try in my personal work to kind of infuse these little details back in. So a lot of times I do paint from photographs for convenience, and I'll try to like add back in some of these little things that maybe aren't really in the photo, but I know that if I'm really standing outside and looking, that often those effects will be there, so I'll try to add it a little bit more back in. Okay, so I've been using this brush for a little while. Right now I'm adding a little bit of a brighter and closer to white color on the left side, where we want just like extra brightness. And I think we're getting close to starting with the blue. So I'm happy with what I have so far, so maybe I'll just like merge that down. and make a new layer. We'll come back in for the blue details. So I think I might go back to the round brush, the opaque brush. Let's try to find the right color blue. Maybe something like this. And it's clipped on, the layer's clipped on, so I can just go right off the edge with my paint stroke and it doesn't matter. And just gonna add that blue to a couple details. You can be pretty loose with these details, like who's to say this urn, you know, how old it is. You know, a lot of these things in old gardens, they could be partially deteriorated. So that's a nice thing. You don't have to worry about painting it too perfectly. If it's a little rough, then I think that has kind of like a rustic and nice look anyway. So just adding some little details and shadows around the sketch, kind of try and give a little bit of shape to these little details on the pot. I'm also going to go to the flat split brush. We've got a couple marks that are like darker, grittier down here. Sometimes you get like little bits of sort of like mold, I guess, from rain and things like that, and kind of discoloring that adds to the aged look. Alright, so the flat split brush. Let's try the dynamic textured brush. I also like this brush. And where can we use it? Up here. Just adding some more marks. All right, let's bring the blue in on the second layer. And there's a little bit of a blue-green color too, like a less saturated green. Kind of going back and forth between the brushes a little bit, trying to decide what looks best. And I think just the variety is good. So we're getting close. I have a brush here round to glazing, and that's supposed to represent like a more wet brush stroke, but not a completely opaque one. So I think there's a bit of that going on in this area in the original. We have some highlights we can bring in, and just little touches of the round brush that aren't completely opaque. A little bit of a darker details in the shadows over here. Let's flip. So I just flipped the canvas just to get a fresh look. Just flipped it over to the other orientation. All right, I'm gonna merge that down. I'm gonna go back to the round opaque brush, and I just wanna work on the edges a little bit. There are a couple edges where I sort of erased out with a different brush, and I think it made my edge look a little bit unnatural. So I'm just gonna go back in with the round brush and make sure all the edges look naturally painted. And I think soon I might be able to actually turn off the sketch layer. At some point I find the sketch layer makes it a little bit hard to see what I'm doing. Let's get a little bit of a darker blue inside there. Well, I hope you guys are enjoying the painting if you're painting along with this one. Don't overthink things with this. You can just put little marks, little dirty textures and little things anywhere, and I'm sure it'll be fine. So I want to have some little shadows over here on the left side. You can see a pattern, a little bit of a pattern on the planter here, and little areas catching the light. I might speed up this area of the painting demo a little bit. We'll see. Let's go back to the glazing brush. So one of the nice things is, even though we're going for these traditional textures and everything, we still are using digital tools. So there's all these different things we can do to edit and improve our paintings that we don't have in traditional. So for example, looking at this pot, I feel like the light, the left side isn't quite reading as bright as I would like. I want to try to brighten that up. I'm going to make a new layer and create a clipping mask. And I think I'm going to try overlay layer blending mode. I want to be really subtle about this because layer blending modes can have a very digital look. So I think I'm going to try one of the big wet painters. These brushes are soft and they have a pretty subtle texture. So I'm going to use it near to white because I really just want this to be brightening up. So we're going to go a little bit beige, but up there near white. And I'm just going to lightly tap it down on the left side. So this is with overlay mode. That's kind of where I went instinctually, but I don't think I love how it looks. So let's try, let's look at linear dodge or color dodge. Oops, try color dodge. I'm going to double click the layer and uncheck transparency shapes layer. You can see the difference in how that looks. It's just, yeah, different effect for color dodge. So I'm going to uncheck transparency shapes layer, lower the opacity a little bit, so we don't want it to be quite so obvious, quite so glaring that we did that, but we do want the bright effect. So I think that looks okay. I don't think it looks too much like we edited things there. I'm also going to make a new layer, create a clipping mask. We can either try overlay again or maybe multiply or something like that. And I want to try a medium gray color and see if we can sort of darken the right side a little bit. So if I turn both layers on and off, this is the difference in value. If I turn the painting into black and white, you can see the values read more strong after the edit. I feel like it has a little bit of a dirty look to it. I don't love it. I'm going to erase a little bit out from the top and I'll just merge that down and we'll go from there. So let's go back and just paint a little bit. I think maybe I had gone a little bit too far with like all these different little colors. I'm going to try to simplify a little bit, so I'm just going to take one of these flat textured brushes and go back and just paint over a little bit and maybe blend in a little bit some areas that maybe I got carried away with like all these different colors. And see if I can find a better shape here. So I said not to overthink painting this little thing, and here I am like, I gotta get it. You know how it is. Sometimes something's just gonna bug you. All right, so flipping, I'm gonna go ahead and erase out a little bit over on this side. I think that looks a bit more the right shape. All right, but it does remind me, this is a very traditional process here for me, just kind of painting over and slowly fixing little things and layering things up. What we can do if we want to lighten some of the darker details on the urn here is we could make a new layer and put that on lighten mode. So I'm going to create a clipping mask. Basically, if we pick a color and then we paint that over there, over the whatever we want to lighten, it's basically only going to affect any pixels that are darker than the color you're painting with. So I can lighten some areas here, and it won't affect any of the blue or any of the colors that are already lighter than the color I'm painting with. It's only going to lighten the darker colors. So I'm going to use that to lighten things up a little bit over there. I think I like that better. And now we'll go back in and try one more time with having some of those dark little areas stand out more, because kind of what happened was it got all dark and then I was missing out on these little scratchy marks that I kind of like. So we'll get those back in, and then I think we'll move on to some other part of the painting. All right, so we've got our darker details back in. I want to add a couple more random paint strokes down here, and then we're going to move along. All right, hopefully that is going to be good enough. We're probably going to return and do some finishing touches on this later, but for now it's just I don't want to get too stuck. All right, so last little highlights, and then I'll merge everything down related to the planter, and we'll leave that for now and work on some other areas. Sometimes something just doesn't look right also because of the surrounding area. So once we get everything together, we'll see if something still looks wrong with this or if it starts to fit in more. I'm just gonna go image adjust brightness, just bring it up a tiny bit. And let's work on the environment again. I think I can finally turn off my sketch layer. We might need it again later, but for now I'm gonna turn it off so it's easier for me to see what I'm doing. And let's see, what area do we want to work on? Let's work on foliage on top. So I'm gonna make a new layer up here. Let's start with some of my favorite brushes in this set, because I always had trouble mimicking this particular look, and this is how I paint. I paint a lot of foliage with this kind of look, which I'm about to show you, and I just couldn't do it. I couldn't do it in digital and get the right look. So what we want is these curved brush strokes that kind of show a little bit of gravity, and like it's sort of pulling down these groups of leaves or pulling down the branches. So I color picked from the current color up here, and then we want to go brighter and more yellow. Let's see how that looks. All right, this is a good green for layering. We're gonna layer up brighter and brighter. So we want to start off with the brush Pretty Big. This is the Paint Strokes 7 brush. We could also start with something Paint Strokes 5 or 6. Those are a little bit less curved. So let's start with Paint Strokes 5. We'll go Pretty Big, or is this 6? This is 6. Pretty Big, And we get some curved brush strokes in there. You can see, I hope in the original, that we get that kind of look of the curved brush strokes. Let me just show real quick. Oh my gosh, here we go. Yeah, so we have these curved brush strokes coming down. And it helps, I don't know, just give a little life to the trees, to the branches, get a little windiness. All right, so we have a lot of different variations, so you don't have to use one brush for too long. I think it's better to break it up so that things look more natural. So now we're gonna switch to a different brush, paint stroke 7, and let's change it to a slightly different color. We'll just go a little bit more yellow or like a little bit brighter or both. And then tap down this brush in a couple places. You don't have to use it everywhere on the painting. So this is what I was talking about earlier with making it look more natural by varying like the similar brushes and just not using, yeah, so here maybe that's looking a little stampy, so we'll go to brush paint strokes 8, which is a very similar brush, but it's not the same brush strokes. These are unique brush strokes, and we can paint these in. And we can switch to 9. And these have slightly different effects about them. They work in like slightly different, like some of them, the size variation will be a little different. So you just have to see which brushes you like the best. But I think it's nice to alternate them all pretty frequently. Paint strokes 10. This is a little bit less curved and a little bit more bulky. I'm gonna color pick from the painting. Yeah, so it gets pretty light. That's actually, it feels too bright compared to what I have, but I guess we do need to get up to that brightness eventually. Maybe I can just brighten up what I have there a little bit for a start. So I have done this on its own layer, these new brush strokes. That's kind of nice because I can come below there and add some extra brushes. So what I kind of like to do is I like to work with layers, but not, I kind of like to pretend the layers aren't there and paint normally like how I would in traditional, but then if I need to paint under something, then I can go and do that if I haven't merged those layers yet. So image adjust, we can kind of try different hues and things. So I went to image adjust hue saturation, and those, yeah, we can find maybe a different color that we like for those paint strokes I just added in. I'm just going down the line, paint strokes 10, 11, I'm just going and trying them all. And it's nice to have, yeah, these different brush strokes that make it look a little bit more like hand painted. And then also the dry brush curved strokes, we can always go back to that one and add some little things there. You can always go back up to the basic painting brushes and go ahead and add some. I like the dynamic textured brush for supplementing with these kind of areas because it can get the right kind of curve and kind of trails off. So this can give a nice look because it has like a real paintbrush look to it. And you're obviously going to make a unique brush stroke every time. So you kind of mix this one in with some of those like stamp brush stroke ones. I am trying to still keep in mind keeping the light coming from the left, but it is a little bit all over the place. But we're going to add more highlights and we'll reinforce that more. Other thing we can do is add some bluish green to the right. So the right side, the foliage is a little bit more in shadow, so it's going to have more of that blue bounce light and things like that. So using some of those leaf brushes and actually making them like this bluish color or something like that over on the right could be cool. Don't know if that's going a little bit too far. Another thing that's nice is remembering that negative space really adds to the scene. So maybe I've painted in a little bit too much with some of these things. We can come back in with the background color and just paint the background color in. And this is something that I do in traditional, so I think it looks and sometimes it looks more traditional than just erasing, you know, going back to the layer and erasing out so you can see the background. I think this is a nice effect, so just painting it in like that, and that can help you refine some of your shapes a little bit more and give some cool angles. You can get different colors of blue, darker colors. And also there is a little bit of, when I was painting this, I was imagining it as a blue sky. I'm not sure if it reads really well like that, but there's little dots of cyan up here. It's supposed to be blue sky showing through all this pretty dense foliage. So let's add some of these in. I used the round dry thick. Let's use round dry opaque for a little bit less breaking up of these brush strokes. But I'm just gonna go through with one color of blue first, and then let's pick a different color, slightly lighter, darker. So this is just to give some nice hue variations. There's also like splatter brushes and things. You could try something like that. Let's see. Well, there's a couple places you can find brushes like that. Under the cloud and wet effects, there's some splatter brushes. I think these are a little too wet for what we're doing here. That would be for a different kind of look. But under the flower painters, there's dot scatter brushes. These are based on scans of, you know, like real paint dots and things, so maybe something like that could be nice to mix in with some of these hand-painted things that we're doing too, but it's a bit of personal preference. Okay, so let's go back to basic painting brushes, and we can also just kind of paint some more, just trying to get them to look natural. Go a little bit darker. Yeah, a little bit darker is better. All right, we're getting there. And I'm gonna color pick from the painting. Let's see how far off I am on this teal color. Not too bad. My painting that I'm making right now, the colors are definitely a little bit different from the original, even with my color picking here and there. So I'm just gonna hand paint some leaf shape. This is Filbert 4 textured. I'm just gonna hand paint some of these small little shapes. This brush tapers off at the end, so it's really nice for that. While I have this brush, we can also add some details elsewhere, like right here. It has a nice texture if you kind of drag it. If you like lift up a little bit on your stylus while you're dragging it down, you know, you'll get a like nice dry edge. And this brush does have tilt on, so you can turn and get a different angle. There's some little bushy tuft over here with some highlights on it. I really like this brush. I feel like I could just paint a whole painting with this brush. It wouldn't have all the shortcuts and wouldn't have all the texture variation, but it's one of my favorite brushes in this set. All right, so I'm trying to find, there's some blue like highlights over here. So we'll add those in. So kind of just going back to what I was saying earlier, when you have a brush, just use it where you can around the painting, and it kind of helps bring a cohesive look to the painting. And then we're going to switch to a different brush, and we can also bring that around and see where else that can be used in the painting, and just kind of keep things moving that way. So down here, I want to bring back like a little bit of these divisions in between the grasses and kind of start making that more fluffy. Let's go lighter. So color pick, we'll go a little lighter. I like to stay zoomed out as much as possible until I like really need to get into details. I had to zoom in when I was working on the planter, but as you can see, when I'm working on something where I'm trying to really like see how it looks in the scope of the entire image, it really helps to be zoomed out, see how things are interacting. So I'm kind of just like blending some of these transitions a little bit more with this brush too. I don't know if I love that or not, because I did like some of those background brushes we used back there. Maybe we could go back to that. Let's go to the large texture painter section and choose like background texture painter 4 or 5. We can also use that. Let's go to 5, yeah. And that's a horizontal kind of stroke. And we can blend a little bit more with that without losing the more intense texture down there, which I like. All right, we'll leave that for now. Okay, back to the filbert brush, filbert for textured. And let's start getting some of these yellows. I'm just gonna color pick from the yellow greens on the top of the image and start bringing those. So just like lightly dragging them. I'm trying to follow this like kind of fanning out shape of the grasses. And just layering things up a bit. Over here, it's a little bit more chaos on the right side. And let's go a little bit more yellow, a little bit brighter. Ooh, that's intense. It's really intense. I do like bright colors, but sometimes when I look closely, I'm like, ooh, that was a really bold choice. Okay, maybe up here a little bit more. Okay, so I think I'll merge that stuff down. So starting to keep the layers merged. Here's the layers so far. We've got that background all by itself, the background blue background, and then the foliage is kind of all on one layer, and then we have the planter. Make sure we save. Let's keep working on the foliage. So now I think we're gonna get to some of the fun part, which is actually like details and some leaves and stuff. One thing I just noticed, I want to add, let's go to that flat split brush. I like that there's some of these brush strokes kind of coming down like this in the original. So I want to get those real quick before I forget about it. Okay, cool. Leaves, right. New layer. There's a bunch of leaves. Oh my gosh, you have to try and just see which ones you like and which ones fit with what kind of painting you're doing. They are under the leaves and plants section. And the painting's a little busy now, but I hope you can see these. Yeah, but there's just, again, it's just slight variations. I'm gonna do this on a separate layer so you can see. We're not gonna leave these here, but just to give an idea. So one might have texture, the other might have the texture off. I hope you can tell, but these were painted individually and they're just slightly different. So some of them are a little bit more different than others. You get to some larger groups, some flowing groups. But the idea is you can use all these kind of interchangeably in an area and it'll look a little bit more like you've painted every individual leaf rather than having like 1 or 2 stamped leaf brushes that you can easily identify the brush. So some of the other special ones, there's curved leaves. And so this goes along with what I was showing earlier. I really like to do this a lot in my paintings, is have like leaves kind of curled around to show bending of branches, things like that. So these curved leaves, some have texture, some are smooth, some are kind of dissolving. So that might be good. We have a lot of dry textures up here, so this dissolving one might work really well. By itself, it kind of looks a little silly, but when you start painting it in a scene like this, it makes a lot more sense. So little leaf shapes like that. Not bad. Let's pick some, let's see, curved leaves 2. Let's go with some brighter colors. So actually, you know what, I'm gonna color pick from the original. Yeah, okay, something like this. Maybe not quite that bright. But yeah, just tap down a couple times. I'm gonna do this on its own layer so that I can modify things, but just as a start, and kind of like wrapping around, so kind of letting it curve around. Again, if you want to flip the way that it curves, just go to the brushes palette and under brush tip shape, click on flip X, and I think that should do it for you. But you can also flip the canvas and then flip the actual canvas, not just the canvas view. And if you do that, then you'll be able to see, yeah, the whole thing flipped, and then you can have it go the other way. But I usually like to, yeah, just to kind of start with the regular direction, and then flip it if you feel like you need variation or something like that. So the curved leaves are nice, but I want to also include some regular leaves. So let's go to the leaf trail, and there's all different kinds of colors. We want to go with some of the pretty light ones. So I'm going to organize those mainly towards the top left. I'm trying to figure out which leaf shape I want. I think I'm sticking with leaf trail 4 to start with. So the sun is coming from the left, so most of the really, really bright light catching leaves we'll put on the left side of these tree clumps. Maybe we could go with the flowing leaves or something. Depending on how hard you press down, they'll kind of change the shape a little bit. So we're trying to make it look more natural and less stampy. I'm trying to alternate the colors a little bit. So I went to image adjust hue saturation. Darken them, desaturate, saturate, change the hue, just see if they fit in. I think I like it. It feels a little bit stark, but I think once we start adding more and more details, it'll fit in. There's a little section here that I guess I kind of ignored by accident. So let's add some details here. Some of the little leaves. I think this demo is going to be a bit long. Sorry. I hope it's helpful. This painting is turning out to be a bit detailed, but I just want to be able to show yeah, the full thing. Oh my gosh, I don't know if you can hear that, but I live near an elementary school, so there's sometimes like screaming children playing outside, so I'm sorry about that. Those of you who watch my live stream are used to it by now. You're all welcome to join if you ever want. Right now I'm streaming every Wednesday on Behance, and it's behance.net/Maddie. And we do like group study sessions and things, so if you want to come try out the brushes and hang out and paint together, I do it once a week. All right, let's try the Filbert Tilt brush. That one's really solid. I'm not going to use that one here. The Filbert Dry Ends, I haven't used that one yet in this painting. I really like that one. Let's use that. And so basically, I like some of these Filbert brushes because, like I was saying earlier, they can have a bit of a taper to them. So it's nice to use them alongside some of these other leaf brushes and kind of paint your own little leaves nearby. So it kind of makes them feel a bit more natural because they've got, you know, you're painting in some, and then there's some of the stamp brushes, so it kind of helps blend them in. And I'm also painting in again with that dark blue. I just don't want to lose all of that negative space. I think it's really pretty, the contrast where you can see through, and it helps keep these little bunches more, you know, like more strongly shaped, these little bunches. You know what I'm saying? Okay. I think that's good. Let's move down a little bit, work on this edge. Let's add a little bit more of a yellow up here at the top. Want to keep that pretty bright. Ooh, I got another brush I can show you. Under the leaves and plants, there are these little triangle leaves. I make leaves in this shape pretty often. So you can just do something like that. These little triangle transition leaves down here. And there's a couple, so you can try to avoid stampy look. We'll alternate them. Can erase out a little bit if it's too stark. Let's look at the bottom now. We're kind of going through, adding details. I think I like this enough to merge it down. I'm like being a little nervous about it because I feel like some of these colors, I'm not sure if it's too bright, but let's be brave. I'm gonna merge it down. So let's go to the bottom with the grassy area, and we'll try to work on that for a bit. Oh man, there's so many brushes here that I'm not getting to use in this painting. There's like all these plant brushes, but we could add some in just, you know, because why not? Like we can put a plant here, but these really aren't necessarily something that makes sense in this scene based on the reference. We can still add some. It's just fun. Add some little plants here and there. All right, down to the grassy painters. I think some of these big grassy big marks might work well because in this painting I see that I've done some things like that. So just around the edges we can have some of these big marks, big bold paint strokes, and some lighter ones too. Wherever there's that transition between colors or transition between light and dark, that's a really good place to add some extra texture. You don't have to texture the whole area a lot of times, but just that transition spot, that'll really show off the texture. There's also the long textured grass might be nice. I'm gonna do it on a new layer because I'm not sure. Yeah, look at that. That's cool. That's cool. That's very, very grass tufts. It's really long, so maybe let's go for the grass sharp and have some shorter grasses. Let's alternate the color a little bit so it feels more lively, like add some more yellows. All right, I'm gonna flip this just for a fresh look. And I think I'm going to go back to some of the basic brushes, like maybe one of the filbert ones that I was using, the dry ends. And let's just paint a little bit, or the filbert 4 textured. Let's just paint a little bit on top of this, and again, just kind of try to help blend together some of these brushes we've been using, so it looks, we keep that hand painted look. And also I want to add some extra colors in, like some more blues and cyan colors in the shadows. Trying to find the right color. There's some little leaves back here. Oops, come back. I was painting on the wrong layer maybe. Okay, let's keep going. Okay, so let's start adding some of these plant shapes. As I'm adding more grass, I can't stop. Okay, So you can see I'm using a lot of layers, but I'm, once I'm like, oh, I like that, okay, merge it down. So I don't like keep all the layers forever. I've still got like a base few layers, but I am utilizing like new layers a lot. So we've got some plant painter brushes we can use. First of all these leaf trails can work to paint plants because you can just kind of have the trail come up like this and it sort of looks like a tall standing plant. There's a couple plant painters that are just called plant painter, and you can do stuff like this with them. So they're really good for silhouettes or things like this where the plant is like really being illuminated, so that you get a really brightly colored plant in front of a dark background. It kind of needs to be, it works best when there's a stark difference like that. There's also, I just saw it. Oh yeah, these little leafy tufts. I kind of forgot about these. These are really cute. These are really cute brushes. They are just leafy little tufts. So I think those are nice for like the base kind of area. And I already filled up with so many other brushes here. I can't even fit these little leafy tufts in. But we can use them. We can use them on some of the plants. So we'll just add. So again, with what I was talking about with the contrast areas. So here we have like an area of like this bright light area. So we can kind of add some of these little leaves around the outside, and it kind of just makes it look like there's random little plants growing in there, and you kind of get the feeling like that whole area has a lot of texture to it, and we don't have to like paint every little plant in there to know that there's something going on. Also, I'm going to add some green leaves. Trying to find the right color. Something a little brighter, like less yellow, but more of a bright green. Lively green. Very nice. And let's look at stems. So we're gonna go up to the basic painting brushes, and let's choose a small detailed texture brush. I like this brush because it has rough edges, so it looks like a small little, you can make these small little paint strokes, but it has some detail to it, it's not digital looking. So I'm going to use this to paint some taller grasses and bases for flowers and plants. So some of these are going to have flowers on top, but I just want to get the base, like little stems and strands in there so we can build something on top of them. You can make the brush a little bit bigger for this right side. Seems like there's some bigger plants. And we can give some little bit of a sway, a little bit of motion to them. I'm not going to try to make the plants exactly like the reference. I mean, I'm trying to get them a little bit close, but we could be here all day if I'm trying to match it perfectly. So let's just do something that looks nice and not worry about that. So lots of little details like that. I'm going to keep that separate. I want to add some details behind there, and I think I might stick with this color. We'll see. I'm going to color pick from the, not the color, might stick with this brush. So yeah, we have some blue details back here, some plants and little leaves. So I might just dot in a couple details myself like this. So these are basically leaves in the background that are getting hit by like a strong amount of blue bounce light. So we could choose one of the leaf trails as well and add like a couple leaves like that. You can erase out if it's too much. But it's nice to have those blues in there. It really is a good contrast with all the yellows and warm greens. Okay, so let's get some of the longer plants in. So I'm gonna go back to some of the basic leaf trails and color pick from the base color of the stem. Maybe you can change the color a little bit. But basically you want to do the leaf trail along the stem like that. And it'll hopefully look like those leaves are growing along that stem. And we can choose a different leaf trail for different plants. You can choose some of the bigger, flowy ones. These are pretty big over here on the right in the reference. I'm trying to figure out what to use for those. Leaf trail bigger, maybe that one's good. Or maybe I could just go with one of the plant painters and make this, you know, a bigger one like that. So with this, you can trail, you can see what I just did, you can trail it right along like that, but it's also nice to kind of dot it along, because that way you can infuse some different different amounts of spaces in between. That the brush won't really, I can't create settings that'll alternate it quite so randomly in that way, so it's nice to like kind of dot it in so you get that more randomness. While these are on their own layer, another thing you can do is lock that layer. If you want to get real fancy, you can lock that layer transparency, go to one of the other brushes like the round glazing brush, and you can choose a highlight or something, and within, you know, you have the layer transparency locked, so then you can kind of paint a little bit of a highlight within the shape of the leaves that you already selected, so that kind of make it look a little bit more detailed. You can always do that with the leaf brushes. I don't really like how these two look together. I think, whoops, I'm gonna erase. I think I want to make this one on the left maybe a little further away. They're getting a bit cluttered, these two plants. So I'm just going to move this guy over. No problem, hopefully. And let's choose one of the more basic. Of course, you can hand paint your own leaves. You know, you don't need to use these trailing leaves. But I don't know about you guys, but if you paint a lot of foliage and leaves, I just have a hard time. I have a hard time creating or finding a Photoshop brush that's just really able to get such a sharp edge and such a wide variation between the leaf tip and like the wide part of the leaf. Like some of the filbert brushes that I made are like the kind of closest I can get, and so I like to use these for painting leaves. But it's really hard to get that extremely sharp tip, and that's why I created all these leaf brushes, because that's, you know, I just figured I'd just take some of my hand-painted leaves and make brushes so I can bring those into my paintings in that way. Just gonna lighten that up a little bit. I think it's going all right. Trying to get a nice lush look with lots of different colors, and trying to have a nice transition between the colors too. So leaving some space from like the yellow greens, transitioning slowly into the blue greens, not so stark between them, but allowing some space. This area got a little bit messy. It kind of didn't work out too great having that extra plant there, 'cause it's kind of conflicting with the taller one. Maybe I can just do something like that. All right, we're almost there. I can go all the way to the background layer because we've kept things separate and darken some areas here if we need to, which I kind of feel like I do want to. And what color is that? It's so much lighter. All right, so we're getting close. Let's add some flowers to the planter, shall we? I think we waited long enough. So I want to start with the base. Actually, let's start with the stems. Then we'll do the base. So I'm going to go back to that detailed brush, the small detailed textured brush. I'm going to choose a bright green, yellow green, and let's draw some stems. Oh, we can bring this layer above the urn. All right, so we've got a few like that. And then I'm gonna try this brush, Thick Stroke Cool Edges. I really like this brush. I could have probably used this in the planter and I just kind of forgot about it. This brush has cool edges, like the name. I didn't know what else to call it. And that was the thing I really liked about this brush. It really looks like a paint stroke, the way that the edges kind of split up like that. It's best used in long strokes. It doesn't do great with like sharp turns, but it has such a cool texture and I find it really helpful in certain situations. So down here, like if we want to get a nice highlight, just bold, thick strokes, it has a natural look. So for the plants inside here, let's just pop in some green and maybe some blue-green, more in the shadows. And it's gonna have a nice opaque, intense look. And we can mix that up with the round, dry, thick, or the round, opaque. For painting this, you don't have to switch brushes as often as I do. I'm just trying to show the brushes, as many as I can in this demo. And the other thing is, I do think if you can use a variety of brushes, like I was saying earlier, it can help give some traditional look to it. So I want to get some nice red flowers in here, and we want a variation of hues. So we're just going to start popping those in like this. And then let's go for a darker, more intense red. And maybe a more purpley red in some of the shadows. Really want to desaturate that though. So just trying to add lots of highlights and shadows and make it feel natural. I'm gonna go back to that other brush and add some different strokes just to break it up. See, just to not have like that round shape all the time. And we do have also some white flowers here. And white flowers, just like any other white objects that we were talking about earlier, in the sun they're going to have like a blue look to them often in the shadowy areas. So we can go pretty bright. Actually, you know what? Let's go to that Filbert dry ends brush. I think that'll be nice for this. So we can go basically almost pure white for the very, very white flowers that are going to be in the highlight area. Let's fill this area out a little bit. And we'll get some light green in there too, because some of these leaves are poking out into the sun. All right. I think, so I'm looking at the reference and looking at my painting here, and I think I've brought the flowers up a little higher in this painting than in the original, but I think I kind of like it, so we'll just keep going with that. So the white flowers, these white flowers in the middle come up a little bit higher. So let's start, and I want to group them up a little bit. You know, one of the things when I'm painting nature is I really try not to paint everything like quote unquote perfect, in the sense that I don't want like all these flowers evenly spaced from each other and, you know, looking the same shape and the same distance from each other and stuff like that. I'm really trying to like group them up randomly, have maybe one bigger, thicker group over here, and then these are spaced out a little bit more, you know, just because things aren't perfect usually in nature. And, you know, if you're doing a stylized thing, sometimes that can be different, or there can be reasons that you want to do something different. But usually for me, I find the better results when I purposely like really focus on being careful not to have like so many repeating things or perfect patterns or something like that. Just try to keep it a little bit more wild looking. So yeah, I'm just going to embrace this planter. The flowers are going to go up a little bit higher than in the original photo. Painting that I did. It was painted from a photo that I took in a beautiful garden. It was really, really pretty. All right, so this is on its own layer. I think I feel comfortable merging it to the planter layer, so now all this is together. We could even see, nice thing of having different layers, I could move it down a little bit so it's got a little bit more space. And we can still paint behind it. So I want to do that and come to the area right behind it and brighten things up a little bit more. Some last little final highlights on individual leaves. So we really want to brighten up some individual leaves just for a little bit of detail. So I'm not sure exactly how long we've been working on this now. I know it's probably close to an hour and a half or so. And I think, at the beginning I talked about how like you really have to kind of build up and layer for it to look natural. So it does take some time, and I hope these brushes help give shortcuts here and there. But you can see like this area, for example, was looking really, really flat when we first started, and I think it looks much better now. So it really just takes time to layer things up and have like some variation of hue and texture. So it takes a little bit of faith when you're in the ugly stage, as they say. I think you can tell that I definitely have my favorites that I'm going to in this brush set, but just remember it does also depend on what I'm painting. So I'm just grabbing the textured stroke brush. I actually really like this brush. I haven't even used it yet in this painting. There's just, depending on the scene that I'm doing, you know, certain brushes will be really handy. So I'd like to, I'm not sure what I'm gonna have time for, but I'd really like to film another demo to go with this brush set. If I can't do it before release, then I'll try to make an update and add another demo or two when I can. I'd like to do one with a more like wet textured brushes, maybe like a cloud painting demo or something like that. So I hope that'll happen. This left-hand bush has been like a little bit toned down in my painting here versus the original, but I think that's okay. I think I like how it looks. Just add a couple little highlights. We're getting close to the end. We are gonna add some more flowers, white flowers at the bottom of the scene too. So I'm looking forward to that. I think that'll make a nice difference from what we have now. Some more little blue details. Okay, so let's look at the bottom of the painting. And we're gonna, we can color pick from what we've done up here with the flowers. And I'm gonna start on a new layer and just start painting in some flowers. You know what, actually I'll start with like the white color and then we'll add shadows. I was trying to decide which way to do that. And remember, we wanna kind of clump them up. I think this brush just happens to look really, really close to the brush that I used when I was painting this in traditional, so it's nice to use this one. But I do have brushes under the flower area that would be nice to use too. It just depends what you want. We've got these dot brushes, which we can use along with our hand painting look, just to kind of speed things along. And I think dots always have like this cheerful look to them. There's also wildflowers and flower tops and things, which I think are really, really cute. But for the type of flower we're doing in this painting, I think the brush that I'm painting with is probably better. But it might be nice, you know, we could add some of these like little buttercups or something. We could add some yellow. Let's see, which shape do I like? I think I like this one. So we could add some yellow flowers that weren't in the original. I love these little flowers. And even purple ones, you know, we could just make this a whole wildflower field. There's these flower tops that have, yeah, a little bit more of a detailed look to the top. I'm not sure if I'm feeling these in this scene or not. Yeah, actually up here, that's kind of nice. We'll keep them on another layer just in case, but I think it's cute. What else can we do? Oh, also I'll show how to use these real quick. These tower flowers. I don't know what else to call them, but you know, there's a bunch of different species of flowers that kind of do this, you know, they kind of have these tall stalks and the flowers kind of pile on top of each other like that. So there's a couple different variations. Maybe something like that is nice in this scene too. Could have it like somewhere here. So it's just a bunch of paint strokes. Just a little bit of a shortcut. So I'm gonna lock that layer, lock the transparency, go up here to the beginning of the brush set and pick one of the basic painting brushes, and I think I'll just give like a little bit of a gradient. Actually, that doesn't look right. Let's stick with our opaque brushes. But I'm still gonna lock that layer. We're thinking about where the light's coming from. It's coming from the left, so I'm gonna take a darker purple and just kind of tap that in on the right side. So that way these brushes have, these flowers have a little bit of a 3D look to them. And for these guys, you know, you can just make some of them darker, some of them lighter. Some of them are in shadow and some of them aren't. And you could even add one more color, one more highlight color if you really want a more natural 3D look. And you can also paint outside the original shape, add something to it that way. And we can do the same thing for the yellow. So this is a nice bright yellow. Let's go a little bit to a darker gold color. Maybe some of them are in shadow or something. I'm not sure if I love that color, but you get the idea, you know? Just having a little variation to them, because they're not all gonna be getting the exact same amount of sunlight. And you can choose to have the brighter ones. You know, if you're trying to draw an attention to a certain area of the painting, you can try to have the brighter ones near that area. I'm gonna select the towers and maybe, yeah, hue shift them a little bit. I'm not sure what color. I don't know what I want with these. I don't like them being the same color as the other flowers. I kind of like them either a lot more blue or a lot more pink. I think I'm gonna go in this direction. I don't know if that color scheme looks wonderful with the red flowers in the flower pot though. If we go in a more blue direction, then those flowers in the flower pot, they stay like the most important thing, which I think might be nice to do. So let's go that way. And let's go back to our white flowers because I got totally distracted. So filbert dry ends, and let's fill in these white little flowers everywhere. We need a lot of them. And we want to keep them looking natural. And some of these stems from earlier that we painted, we can add little white flowers on top of those. It's okay for flowers to overlap. Just bring that layer above. In fact, I think it helps show distance and depth. We also have some plant stamps and flower stamps. I just think that I think they might be too detailed for what I've painted in this image, so I'm not going to use them here. But there are some nice wildflower stamps. We could try one or two and see how it works, but I just I'm not getting the feeling that it would look great in this kind of scene. Let's see. New layer. Let's go down to the plants and flower stamps and choose something like this. So maybe we could just sort of use the top. Something like that. Whoops, wrong layer. Oh, by the way, you probably noticed by now, but if anybody's wondering, as you can see, I don't really like name my layers and stuff. I like to paint in a way that feels like there's a flow and like intuitive feeling, so I don't like to be bothered with like stopping and naming things and trying to find things. So when I paint, I really like to use the auto select layer. So basically up here, if you have your move tool selected, yeah, the arrow pointing in 4 directions. Up here on the top left, you can see it says auto select, and you can have this set to layer or group. I usually do layer, so just make sure it's checked. If it's not checked, then basically you're only going to be able to select things on the layer that you have highlighted on your layers palette. If you turn on auto select, then basically what it's going to do is anything that you click on, you can see that the layers palette is like highlighting in all different places. It's just going to, anything I click on, it's going to immediately select the layer that thing is on and put me on that layer. So I find that the easiest way to paint and deal with things. So I'm going to move this around. If I'm doing client work or something like that, of course I will name my layers and make a file that is able to be shared and used with other people. But often for myself, I don't bother with that stuff because I tend to use fairly minimal layers, and I just use the auto select layer, and that works great for me. So let's flip. Flipping the canvas is a little jarring. Usually whenever I do it, I don't like how my painting looks. So it's good to, I think it's good to like flip and paint for a little bit on the flipped version, and sometimes you can like fix little things. We're almost done with the demo, but there are some really important finishing touches things I want to share with you, including how to do, how to overlay the textures that come with this brush pack. So I hope you guys will watch to the end if you have time. I'm gonna add some more highlights here, just noticing some sort of boring areas when I flipped, some areas that caught my attention, like let's do something there. All right, so we want to add some of those shadows, blue shadows, to the flower layer too. So remember, light's coming from top left, so bottom and right side, if anything, is where we're going to add like the blue. And you can also add some fully blue flowers in like the, you know, fully shadowed area. Just little paint strokes. And we also want to go back, I want to go back and add some stems to those random little flowers we added in the back. They don't all have to have stems. When something's pretty far away, the stems are really thin, and a lot of times, unless they're getting hit by light really strongly, a lot of times you don't even really see the stems. A lot of times it looks like leaves and flowers are just kind of floating. And I think that's a really cool effect. So you don't feel like you have to draw every single stem. I think it's kind of more realistic to not do that. But we will add some. And then our brain will fill in the rest, I hope. This got a little bit more chaotic than the original painting in wanting to show like different brushes and different possibilities. But I think I like it. I'm gonna try to do the last touches. I feel like the middle here is a little bit lacking. Let's put some leaves and some flowers in there. Okay, so where can we improve this before the end? I want to look at the light on the planter a little bit, see if there's anywhere we can make it more interesting. I'm gonna get a really bright color and add some final highlights facing towards the left side. Maybe with the red flowers I should also add yeah, more of the shadowed ones on the left and the lighter ones on the right. Didn't really follow that so much up there. And I think I want to do one last layer of leaves on the top foliage. Now I'm looking at the bottom. It's so like lush and full of all kinds of busyness. So I think we can afford to add some more leaves to the top here. So I'm going to go for some bright green. And I don't want to go too overboard, but we'll just give it a little bit more, a little bit extra. I really like the flowing leaves brushes because they feel like a bit more natural shapes. So I'll also sometimes make a, oops, sorry, make a brush stroke and then, whoops, and then like actually take that and transform it into the exact angle that I want if I feel like I can't get that for some reason when I'm actually painting. Sometimes I'll just stamp them in and move them around like that. So this is just giving a little bit more detail up here. Let's go to the curved leaves. A little bit more and we'll be done. All right, I think it's looking pretty cute. All right, what can we do now? So I'll show you what I do for finishing effects. This is on any painting. Doesn't have to be digital or traditional. I mean, it doesn't have to be a traditional style digital painting. This could be, you know, any digital painting that I do. I kind of use some of these same tools at the end to finish things up. So I'll just save the painting as is. Let's see if there's any last things we can merge down. I do want to keep the planter separate. I think this can go below. Some of the flower layers need to be above the planter just because they're overlapping it. So just checking to make sure I really like everything that I added on that last layer before I merge it down. And so one last thing, I want to make a new layer above the planter. I'm going to put it on lighten mode. There's like a really bright glowy kind of effect in the original painting around some of the areas that are getting hit by really bright light. So I'm going to choose the Filbert for textured brush and just kind of lightly graze lightly for dry effect around some of those areas. So I think you can see it if I turn the layer on and off. It's not too much, but a bright blue. Maybe there's a couple other areas you want to add that bright blue. Just make things a little bit more interesting. Just a little bit more glowy. Okay, well, it's looking pretty traditional to me. I'm happy about that, but let's see what we can do to make it even more so. So I want to do some finishing effects. Let's go to the bottom of the layers palette and click the little half circle icon. And we're going to click on, let's click on curves. So curves I use to kind of take a look at the values, and I'll use this to lighten and darken. But depending on where you grab on this graph, you can lighten or darken the highlights, the higher values here, and you can lighten and darken the lower values and mid values, and you can also look at individual color ranges and lighten and darken those. So there's a lot of flexibility there. Oftentimes when I go to use curves, I have some idea of what I'm trying to fix, and I'll go there to do that specifically. In this case, there's not necessarily anything. Maybe brightening it is nice, but I think I'm okay with it. You can also mask things away. So for example, you can go back to the curves and say, I want to get rid of some of that lightening effect. I only want it in certain places. So maybe I only want it on the top foliage because I felt like that was a little dull compared to the bottom. So I just paint away the areas that I don't want with a black or just a darker value. It can be gray, it doesn't have to be pure black. Pure black will completely get rid of that effect. All right, so yeah, I like that, that's okay. And then you can also use levels to adjust values. So this will you can go through these sliders and adjust highlights, midtones, and shadows this way. But I feel like values are okay here. That's not, I think that's okay. What I want to do is look at the colors. So I like to use color balance and go through the shadows, midtones, and highlights and decide, you know, you can make the shadows, like in this case, a little bit more warm. I think that looks nice. I just kind of eyeball it. Sometimes I have an idea and I come in here thinking, okay, I want it to be more warm or cold, and I specifically move it in that direction. But a lot of times I'm finishing a painting or I'm like halfway through a painting and I just kind of want to see if this gives me any ideas and maybe can improve things in a way I don't expect just by trying things out. So I just go through the sliders, go through each one, and see if I can make any improvements that way. So if I turn this on and off, you can see I've made it a little bit more bright and sunny and green, and I think I like that. It's a little less blue and not as dark. You could lower the opacity a little bit if you want to tone down what you did. The other thing I like for adjusting colors that is a super amazing tool is the selective color option. So you can go through each of these color ranges and adjust things within that. So just the reds, I can adjust just the reds. I can brighten up the colors of that, the flowers in the planter. I can make it more orange, more magenta. Yeah, we can control everything here without having to like make a selection of that color or do anything the long way. It's really, really handy. So we can look before and after, just a little bit more saturated, I guess. But we can look at yellows. And so I just like to kind of go through the sliders sometimes and see what I can do. Sometimes I end up doing a bunch of stuff and then getting rid of it because I don't like what I've done. But other times I feel like it can really save a painting if I'm struggling, and I can come here and get some ideas. So what I'm doing is kind of like using this to separate a little bit the greens and yellows, just get a little bit more of a difference between them. So if I turn this on and off, this is off, on. It kind of toned things down a little bit. Let's look at the cyans. So yeah, you can just go through all of these different colors and see what the results are. This is not something you have to do, of course, but I find it really helpful. And sometimes I do it if I'm in the middle of a painting and I feel like I am kind of lost on direction, and sometimes this will start to get my painting looking better or just give me like a new idea for the color, and then I'll be like, okay, I can take it from here. I got ideas now. Woo! It's really hard to mess with the highlights and shadows on there. I'll make a new adjustment layer for it, because these like are really, really intense. They can be really beautiful, but in a painting, like look at this. I really like how this looks right now. I think that's super cool, but it definitely is a filtered look, and it's not like what I was going for with this painting. So I could see it being like really nice in your artwork, but I don't know about, yeah, using it in this painting. Maybe very, very, very lightly. See just a tiny, tiny bit of that. Maybe even less, just a little bit. Okay, we're getting close to the end here. I think, I'm like second guessing a little bit the values. Okay, let's try something. I'm gonna actually go to adjustment layer for brightness and contrast, and let's up the contrast a lot. Well, it feels like a lot. So what I'm gonna do is, I actually probably like an airbrush for this, but I'll use one of these big, wet painters, and I'm going to get rid of the effect all around the outside of the painting. So I'm going to paint it in a darker color, so then it's only keeping the brightness contrast effect right around the planter. So I hope that's going to help bring our eye to there, because that'll be like a very contrasted area. It already was pretty contrast. Okay. So if I'm going to just take a look, I'm going to want to see what all these adjustments did. This is the before and this is after. Before, after. It kind of hurts, but sometimes you look at the before and after and you don't really like where your adjustments went, and it just happens sometimes. I think I do like the adjustments here, but I'm going to lower the opacity of this group of layers a little bit, so it's showing through to the original a little bit more, and then hopefully that's a happy place right there. Okay, so the next thing we're gonna do is look at adding some patterns and finishing adjustments to the painting, including, let's try mimicking this border, the sketchbook border there. The painting could certainly be done as is, but I think it might be fun to do something, yeah, to finish this off and make it look very traditional, like it's really sitting in a sketchbook. Okay, so for the next thing that we're going to do, I often like to just save a duplicate PSD so that I'll have this version that you see right here, and then I'll also have a version which will be the version that has like the fancy edges and all that. So, but I'll just go ahead and show in this file what I would do. So I'm going to group everything except for that background paper layer from the beginning. So if I turn this layer off, you can see that. I'm going to go to Image, Canvas Size, and the original size of the image is 4000 by 4000 pixels. I'm going to add some, you can turn relative on or off. It doesn't really matter. If I want to add like 200 or 400 pixels, you know, I could just type it in here, or I could make it 4200 or 4400 or something like that. I find it easier to check relative and then just put what I want to add. So let's try 300. Hopefully that'll be wide enough. So we're going to do 300. The canvas extension color, let's just color pick from this. We want it to be the same color and say okay, and then we'll turn this back on. And I think that's pretty good. It looks like I went outside my lines somewhere on one of these layers. Let's find out which one it is. Oh yeah, we'll turn that off. Here we go. Yeah, so I'm just gonna erase that out. Okay. So I'm trying to think of the easiest way to do this. I will probably duplicate this group 2 and then merge that together. So right now what I have is 2 versions. I have all the layers that I want saved here, but then I have a version that's just the painting and that's it. And what we can do is maybe mask away the edges so that they look a little bit more cool and traditional looking. So we can go to the bottom of the layers palette and press this button here, which is the mask, this little rectangle with a circle in the middle. And then we can choose some brush with cool edge. I don't even know which one I want to use for this. Maybe flat dry, maybe flat extra textured 7, just to try. So the idea is as you paint with black on the mask, it's going to basically erase out. So you can just go along the edges very lightly and just give a little bit of this roughed up edge, just erase out a little bit with that roughed up edge. You can hold shift as you go down if you want like a perfectly straight line. This is sort of can represent like that tape peel that comes off and sometimes doesn't have like a totally perfect edge. So just hold shift. Gotta find the right distance, hold shift. But I think this one works out pretty well, shift. So the brush I used again was the flat 7 extra textured. I think I like how that one looked. So now we have those edges. So what we want to do next is look at overlaying some textures. So included in your downloads, you should have had this file. It is a pattern file. So basically what you want to do is go to the paint bucket tool, and then up here you'll see that you can select pattern or foreground color. So you want to select pattern, and then you'll see if you click that drop down, you'll be able to see whatever patterns you have. So if you want to use the patterns that you can download with this set, just go to your cogwheel and select load patterns. So in your folder, or if you created a folder for your downloads, or in your library, you should have been able to download this paper texture patterns file. It's a PAT file. So what I think, if you're using Procreate, I'm just going to give you the pattern, the images, the JPEGs of the patterns, because I'm not sure if Procreate has an equivalent to the pattern thing. I have to look into that. But if you're in Photoshop, you should be able to have the pattern file. So you just select that and it'll import them right there. So again, cogwheel, load patterns, locate the pattern, locate the pat file, and then load it in. And there you go. So we don't need doubles, but there they are. So then what you can do is you have your pattern selected. You can select which one you want. There's 2 gouache painted sheets and a watercolor paper sheet. And then what you can do is make a new layer and just pop that in. So the thing is, these are repeating texture patterns. So when you drop it in, you know, it's going to just go with this sort of default size of the pattern, but depending on the size of your image, this may not make sense. Like for me personally, I think this is okay, but sometimes, let's say I was working on a really big image, I wouldn't want the paper texture to be extremely big because that it wouldn't make sense. You'd want the paper texture to be smaller. Like for example, if you're working on a really big piece of paper, you're just going to see these tiny little bumps. It's not going to be so big. You guys get what I'm saying. So to deal with that, there's a different way that you can apply these. So again, like the regular way would just be come here, select pattern, grab the one you want and pop it in that way. And this might work, and that's super easy and nice if it does, but if this is too big, if these paint strokes are too big for what you want, we're going to do it a different way just to give an option. So let's get rid of these. Whoops. I'll just get rid of these and make a new layer, and we'll go to layer, new fill layer, and then click pattern. So layer, new fill layer, pattern. You can name it if you want to. You don't really have to do anything with this first page other than naming it if you want to. You can press OK. Okay, so then here is where you can mess with it. You can click scale and decide like how big you want the pattern to be. So then you just press OK. So this is the watercolor paper. So what might be nice in this situation is to drag this watercolor paper pattern below the painting and have that be just that's the pattern for the paper. So for me, I like that look. We can put it on, we want to put it on a layer blending mode because we want the color of the paper in the background. The other way we might be able to do this is to put the background on a color mode. Yeah, actually, I like that. So what I did was instead of I just copied the background layer and put that layer on color mode. So it just applied the background color to the values, like the shading that was created by the pattern fill layer. So you can use all kinds of different layer blending modes. There's so many different ways to go about this, but I think that's a nice way to do it. Okay, so I'm happy with that. I'm just gonna merge that down. That's fine with me, I'm gonna merge it down. So now that's my new background. So now I want to apply the paint textures, and I personally, the reason I'm kind of doing these separate layers with the paper and the paint is this was a sketchbook painting, and basically for the outline, the edges, I don't really want the paint texture overlay to be outside of the bounds of the painting. So I'm just going to make a new layer now. Let's go to layer, new fill layer, pattern, and press OK. And I'm going to choose the pattern I want. Let's go with the first painted sheet. Let's make the scale smaller, and then press OK. So I guess I went for around 34. And I'm going to do two pattern layers. So I'm going to make a new layer and layer, new fill layer, pattern, and okay, let's go for the gouache painted sheet 2. Let's scale that way down. Woo. Maybe around, yeah, whatever, 34 again, I guess. Okay, so now we've got these two. So what I like to do is play with different layer blending modes to apply them. I'm also going to right click, create clipping mask. I'm going to clip them on to the painting, and then I'm going to select them and play around with layer blending modes. It's really blinding, I'm sorry, it's very intense. But I found overlay, multiply, color dodge. I haven't been able to find a layer blending mode that works perfectly with every single painting that I do, because depending on the values in the painting, depending on how bright or dark the painting is, a different layer blending mode might look better. But I've found that a combination of, let's see, pin light on the top one and multiply on the bottom one worked for some of my paintings. It doesn't work on this one. yeah, it's really an experimental thing, but you can just scroll through. I'm sorry, this is so intense. You can just scroll through. And so if I turn this layer on or off, you can see that with a combination, so pin light and hard light combination seemed to add texture, but without messing with the values too much or darkening or lightening it. You can just go ahead and use only one of these if you want. It doesn't look like pin light's really doing too much on this one. But yeah, if you look closely, I hope you can see the advantages of it just adds like these little paint strokes and little imperfections. Yeah, you can see both of them, before and after. It adds like these little marks and little things that just, especially in areas where you had a very clean paint stroke and there really wasn't if you were using a brush that really didn't have too much texture, it just adds a little bit of something. Some of those leaf brushes that don't have too much texture, this is something that can work. And you can go through the layer blending modes and find some that show a little bit more of an intense look than others. And depending on the size of the textures, like if I made those textures really large instead of down to the 34%, they'd be even more obvious. So let's make a new layer and drop in the pattern, just like the default size, because it's pretty big. Create the clipping mask, and let's try that on a hard light so you can see just how dramatic that is. I can turn off the other layers. But the before and after of this is a lot more dramatic. So it depends on the person. It depends on your personal taste if you like that or not. I kind of like it to be a little bit subtle. I think that's a bit more convincing, but we can leave this on just a lower opacity, and I think that's nice too. It just depends, but I do think for like the really gritty textured paintings, it can work well to have a lot of texture on top if you're going for a very dry look. So I think I'm pretty happy with this painting. I'm going to go to the curves and brighten it up a bit. Just after looking at it for a while more, I'm thinking, I do actually want to brighten that up a bit. Maybe the vibrance, maybe make it a little bit more vibrant. It's already very vibrant, but I like bright colors. And I think that's fairly close to the original. I could definitely add some additional little brush strokes and things. Maybe I will add some more. I didn't want to make this demo like 5 hours long, but I hope that it helped. And if you have any questions, you can definitely reach out to me on social media or send me a message here, wherever you've purchased the brushes. If it's on ArtStation, you can send me a message here. But I'm on Instagram. Madeline Inc. is my digital art account, and if you're interested in seeing more of my gouache paintings, you can follow me at lucky.melon. And yeah, I would love to hear from you if you try out the brushes and want to tag me on your socials so I can see them. That would be great. No pressure. And you're always welcome again to come hang out at my live stream every Wednesday on Behance if you want to paint together, use the brushes together, and stuff like that. So I enjoyed doing this demo. Thank you for taking the time to watch the whole thing if you are here at the end. I know that was a long one, but I hope it helps, and I hope you enjoy the brushes, and I will see you next time. Happy painting. Ooh, I forgot one last effect. I forgot one last thing. It's a very, very simple thing, but in case it's something you don't know about, I think it can be really nice with your digital brush strokes. So let me just pop that in here real quick. I'm gonna make a new layer, go to Image, Apply Image, press OK. That's gonna create a flattened version of everything. And on this layer is when I like to go in and go to Filter, Sharpen, and just do a quick sharpen. And it doesn't seem like it does much, but when you zoom in, you can really see that it really does sharpen up those digital brush strokes and like lets you see the edges a little bit more sharply. You can go to Filter, Sharpen, sharpen more. You can use the unsharp mask if you want a more dramatic sharpening, and you can mess with the little sliders here. But yeah, I usually just do at least a sharpen filter. And you know, sharpening too much can kind of like degrade your painting in a way. It can kind of make it a bit pixelated. I usually sharpen at least a little bit, and definitely in the focal area, and you can lower the opacity or tone it down if you think it was a bit too much. And then the final thing is sometimes I'll go to filter, noise, add noise. When you're imitating a traditional painting, a lot of times these traditional paintings were done with where there were photographs or scans were taken of the painting, so they do kind of have that pixelated look to the final image of the work. So a little bit of noise can be nice. So yeah, there's my last little things I forgot to do. Really going now though. Bye you guys, see you next time, take care, and thanks again for buying the brushes.